We are live. I'd like to welcome everyone to another episode of Heart to Heart with Bree. I'm really looking forward to tonight's conversation. We'll be talking about dementia, something that affects many households all over the world. My guest is Marcia Harris, and she's written a book, You, Your Loved One in Dementia, When Memory Fades, but Love Remains. Marcia, would you please introduce yourself to the viewers?
Hi, Bree. Hi, viewers. Thank you all so much for sharing in this evening, and thank you, Bree, for having me. As you said, my name is Marcia Harris. I go by Marcia Cia Harris, which is the last three letters of Marcia, and I am a serial entrepreneur. I'm an author. I am a speaker. I am a coach. I am a newborn care specialist, doula, postpartum doula, and it's just my pleasure just to be here. I like to meet people, I like to share with people, and I like to inspire people. So I hope that from this conversation this evening, someone will leave feeling inspired.
If someone is interested in you coming to speak at their event or interested in your book, how can they reach you and how can your book be purchased?
Okay, so my book is You, Your Loved One, and Dementia, and this is it here. It's live and available on Amazon. I also have copies that if persons want an autograph copy, they can reach out to me. My email address is Marcia, Marcia, that's my first name, underscore Adore, Adore, at iCloud.com, or they can send me a text, a WhatsApp, a message at 201 466 6936. And that goes for speaking engagement as well. I'm available
Okay.
to speak with groups, with churches, with organizations who are interested in having me um, just minister
Okay,
in
thank you.
any way,
Thank you
shape,
for
or form.
that. Thank you for that. Now, what is dementia for those who don't know?
Okay, so let me go by the psychological term for that. What is dementia? Dementia is not a single disease, but a general term used to describe a group of condition that affects the brain. It gradually interferes with memory, thinking, reasoning, communication, behavior, and the ability to carry out everyday activities. Although dementia is more common in older adults, dementia is not a normal part of aging.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And what are the beginning signs of dementia? And is there a personality change that takes place in the individual?
Okay, so some of the beginning signs that we may see, and it does not necessarily mean that all these point to one having dementia, but just like someone becoming very vague, becoming forgetful, um, having a key in their hand but not really realize that they are. And I hope I'm not getting there. But just some general things getting distorted, feeling lost and displaced in familiar settings.
Okay.
So you might be going to the grocery store and it's a route that you are very aware of, but it takes you a while to get there. It takes you a while to find your way back home. It takes you a while to remember who you're talking with. The conversation just changes in mid-here. So it does not necessarily, as I said, mean that this is dementia, but
Okay.
definitely these are signs that we ought to be concerned about.
Okay. Now, is there usually a personality change in the individual?
Yes, there can be. Some people becomes more less talkative, less communicative. Some people might become more aggressive. So different persons will display the disease differently. So we have to know our individual, our families, and just see where something may not be adding up one to one.
Do those with dementia become fearful and lose confidence in themselves?
You broke up just now. I did not hear your question.
Okay. Do those with dementia become fearful and do they lose confidence in themselves?
Yes, they do become fearful, afraid of their own shadows, afraid of just become fearful on a whole. I remember my brother would become very, very scared, really. But then we were not even seeing that as a sign of dementia. I would remember occasions that his wife, would, but she was always the type would always be like asking him, "What's your route tomorrow? Who you got to pick up? Where you got to go?" And so I would always see these little sticky notes that he have in his vehicle because he used to transport people. And he would always just laugh it off and said, "My wife just wants me to stay on top of things," but not realizing that he was actually not remembering. So when she wrote those things, and she just thought that she was just helping him just to
Right.
coordinate. So those are some of the things that we need to look out for.
Now, would you suggest that we take our loved one for a doctor's appointment if we see these signs as a precaution?
Most definitely. Once we see these signs, because, for me, I love to self evaluate. And something has happened to me. I said, oh, maybe I'm just. But once we see these signs and we see them happening, then what we need to do, we don't self evaluate, we don't self diagnose. What we need to do, because dementia can only be confirmed by a series of tests, blood tests, MRI, scans, family history coming into play, and all these things. So these are not things that we ought to take that, oh, it's just a sense of forgetfulness, or they're my parents, they're already in their 70s or 80s, they're getting old. So, because dementia is not necessarily a old person's disease, right?
Right.
So we should never just take things for granted. What we need to do is to document any changes that we're seeing. Start documenting. Oh, today is Tuesday. Today is Sunday, and it's the 16th of October. I saw my husband doing this instead of, that's not the norm for him to have done. But come again Wednesday, you might see the same change. Wednesday, you also need to make that notation, right? And then just keep a log. And if it is something that is persistent, then definitely we need to say to a family doctor, to a doctor, to anyone, because you're not going to go to a neurologist first. You're going to go to your general GP, your family's doctor, however, you're normally serviced. And you are going to bring your concerns forward. And then, based on what you have said, they will do their evaluation. They will order whatever test they may think is necessary, and they will start guiding you, start charting, because that's what we had to do with my brother. Unfortunately, by the time we had started to do this, the memory, the brain was already showing sign of dementia. Because what happened is that you're going to see those plaques and those little things coming up in the brain where the disconnections are. And that's just based on my brothers and the evaluation that he did and all of that.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Now, I'd like to talk about patience. And this is bringing back a memory. Years ago, I remember being in a store, and there was a young man with a man that I assume was his grandfather. And, he was asking him the same question over and over. And I will never forget how he yelled at him. And I mean, I could tell that the older gentleman was embarrassed. But I remember him saying, like, don't ask me that damn question again, whatever. And I could tell he was embarrassed after the outburst. People were looking at him like, oh my gosh. But, looking back, I can understand that it takes a lot of patience. So I'm asking you, how important is patience? I know that being a caregiver is not easy, but how does having patience help the caregiver and help the patient at the same time?
That's a very important question, Bree, and an answer that really needs to be given a lot of consideration. I'll start with my brother. My brother was the most patient person that I could think of, the most respectful. He was so very calm. And by the way, we just lost him on this Thursday.
I'm so sorry for
Um,
your loss.
thank you so much. But how important is patience? I'll share one story with you.
Sure.
I live in the States, my brother lived in Jamaica. And about 3 years ago, I went to Jamaica. And he had asked me the same question a couple of times, you know? And I started to become a little bit aggressive. And like I said to him, "But you just asked me that. Why are you asking me that again?" And he said to me, "So why you have to answer me like that? Why are you getting so aggressive? Why are you getting so cross?" And I tell you something, Bree, for about 3, 4 hours, it didn't matter what I said to him. He was not responding. And a part of what I have in my books, and I paraphrase, it says that our loved one living with dementia, they're already feeling a sense of, they know something is off. They just can't identify it. So, one of the things that I pointed out in this book was that for persons who are out there and you see someone, the behavior may not be the norm. Maybe you know the person, and the behavior is not the norm. I ask two things of you, a couple of things of you. Don't stare unnecessarily at the person. Don't make unkind remarks. "Oh, so what do him? Why am I behave so? Is he crazy? Is he?" We make these kind of statements. We stare at persons unnecessarily, and it makes them uncomfortable. So one of the things leading up after my question, and I say, if you notice this, I ask of you, if you can't be kind in your words, if you can't be kind in your gestures, then I ask you just to totally, completely leave it alone. Because just saying the wrong thing is worse than saying nothing at all. Just doing the wrong thing is even worse. So it's better to ignore. If you're not able to offer a kind word, to offer a kind deed, then it's just better that you keep going.
And it has to be a very frightening feeling for the person, because to go from being someone that had a very high functioning life, a career, whatever it was, then all of a sudden to feel lost and afraid and not having a memory, not having, your memory is not what it used to be. And in your heart that it's not. That has to be a very frightening thing. And I think that there are people out there who can be very unkind. It's like, you know, I, I'm glad you said what you said, because I do believe we have to be mindful of our words and, patience for those who are going through this. Patience is such an important thing, and patience really is a virtue. And,
It is.
I think we should ask ourselves, how would I want to be treated? Would I want others to be patient with me? I think it's
Right.
very important.
Can I just read you a little something from my book
Sure,
here?
go ahead. Go ahead.
It says one of the most heartbreaking realities is that the person experiencing dementia may not fully realize what is happening to them. Imagine how terrifying it must feel as they slowly sense confusion and a loss of control, yet do not fully understand why. They'll probably notice people correcting their words and actions, and even feel others watching them more keenly. They'll become frustrated because their own mind no longer feel dependable nor safe. Many people living with dementia experience fear, you ask that question, embarrassment, anxiety, and even depression during the early stages, and families and loved ones are joined right alongside them in these emotions, right? In public, they may even be made a spectacle of, as many people, I am assuming unknowingly, may also add to the shame and guilt with their stares and unkind remarks. Let me ask a simple request of you. If and when you encounter a situation that seems unusual, if you are not able to be kind in your speech, actions, or gestures, then I beg of you to refrain from acting, staring unnecessarily, or commenting negatively. If on the other hand, if on the other hand a kind gesture of any sort is greatly appreciated.
Thank you for reading the excerpt from your book. One of the most painful memories of my life, something I experienced when I was in my 20s, and it was the last time I saw my grandfather alive. And I will never forget, and I had a close relationship with my grandfather. And he said to me, "And who are you, young lady?" I will never forget that. And I said to him, "I'm your granddaughter." And he, and he looked at me and he said, "For true?" I said, "Yes, I'm your granddaughter, Bridget." And he had no recollection of who I
Really,
was. And I
really.
remember my sister telling me the same thing that happened to her, but I didn't believe her because in my mind, no, this was impossible. And it's something that has stayed with me. So, I think how difficult it must have been for my grandmother. And I think of all the caregivers out there who you're taking care of your loved one and they may not even remember who you
Who
are.
you are.
I
Yes.
mean, oh my gosh, it's so sad. And I have to ask you this. Are there any steps available to stop or slow down the progression of dementia?
There are medication that they do give, especially in the early mid stages, that can slow the progression of the disease. But
Okay.
then again, as I said earlier on, is that people progresses differently.
Yes.
There are some people that will have dementia for years and they still keep going. My brother was only diagnosed maybe about 5, 6 years ago, although we would have seen the trends happening a little bit earlier. But 5, 6 years later, he's gone, right? So it all depends, like you and I, we may have the same illnesses, but yet still our bodies react differently. So I may go on a faster decline. Persons have cancer every day, go through maybe similar treatments, but their bodies react differently, right? Their brains react differently. So it all depends, I am sure, on the individual that we're dealing with.
And I guess the stage of the disease also, right? Because maybe by the time
Exactly.
the diagnosis came in, they were at an advanced stage. I mean, I don't know much about this, but I'm really glad we're having this conversation. Mikey, thank you so much for tuning in. I always appreciate you. Are there any activities that can help the patient?
Well, from my research, Bree, what is important is that we stay as close as possible to norm. So just like you would be taking care of a child, an infant, we try to keep them as involved as we possibly can. Reading, doing crossword puzzles, doing little activities, taking them on a walk. Just like our children, we take them on our walk. We try to give them a little reward, something, a little leaf here, a little piece of stick there, something. Do activities, tying of the shoelaces, help if they can still and they are able to let them put their cereal, their breakfast in their bowl, their milk. Let Just keep them as active as possible. Because when you're keeping the body active, you're also motivating the mind to think. So the more we distance ourselves in terms of trying to keep them active, it's like we may have a child and we are like, oh, child wants to learn to cook, but it's going to take too much out of me. I can't be bothered to show you how to do this. Then I'm going to have to put you on a stool. I'm going to have to show you how to use the knife properly. Let us, and that also takes patience in order for you to deal with them. Because it may be going over the same story a million times. It may be trying to tell them that this is how you do this is how you do that. But let us not forget that we're not just teaching them an activity, we're teaching the mind to think. We're trying to keep the mind functional and active. And so, if we're able to do and to keep the mind and the body active, then we're also able to keep the dementia, the memory loss at a bay because we are keeping to remind them to think and to function.
I have to ask you this because I know there are some people who they become overwhelmed and they may think, you know what, I'm just going to lock this person in their room. You know, at least I know where they are and, they won't be able to harm themselves. How how mindful do we have to be in having a game plan? Because I know that having a person locked in a room is not going to help. I know it's probably going to make the person feel even more afraid, and more confused about their situation. So how important is it to have a game plan on how to deal with all of this?
It is very important. And also, this is where we find communication and family togetherness coming together. Because lots of times, unfortunately, caregiving is left to one person or to very few. And it can become very taxing, it can become very frustrating. A lot of people become angry because a lot of people are saying, okay, fine, this person did not really take care of me. This person is not there for me when I needed them. So you find that you have caregivers who are caring for someone, but at the same time, they are frustrated, they are angry, they are unforgiving. And if you find unforgiveness in someone taking care of another person with dementia, then you might find some measure of disadvantage going on there,
Yes.
right? So it is very important that people look within themselves. And if you're not able to, if you feel by any chance that you are being angry, you're not able to cope as efficiently as you think you ought to, then it is always recommended that you ask for a break. Um, here I pause just to lift my hat off to my sister in law. I call her my sister in law because There's not a time that I've ever spoken to her. I've never heard her speaking to him in any way, shape, or form, treating him anyhow than I would expect her to. Yes, we were all in denial in the early stage. We were really like, oh, nothing is wrong with him, because they have good days and they have bad days. But the good days would make it seem as though there's nothing really happening. And it would make you want to wonder if you're the one who is not thinking straight, right? But then again, when the bad days come, then you realize that, oh, so really and truly, maybe he's not remembering. And then you think, but yesterday I spoke to him and he was very rational. And a few hours later, I'm talking to him and hearing his the things are not adding up. And tomorrow he may wander and go away, right? So it's just that the mind think differently at different times.
Now, would you say,
I don't
would
know
you
if that makes
agree?
sense to what I said.
No, that makes perfect sense. Now, would you agree that families should get together, have occasional meetings, and come up with a game plan to share, responsibilities? You know what? Maybe I can come in today and I can take care of him. Because I can see this being a perfect storm for abuse. For like if a caregiver is overwhelmed, maybe if there had been some hard feelings from the past. And I'm not saying that this is the case that it happens on a regular basis, but I could
Right.
see a person being overwhelmed, and I could see it not being uh, an ideal situation, and I could see abuse. I mean, I could see where this could be a perfect storm for abuse to take place on this poor individual who's already suffering enough. And I can understand that caregivers are overwhelmed. Is it fair to say that there are families that maybe it always falls on one or two people? And how important it is, because I would like you to get that across to the viewers. How important is it to share the load? Because for the caregiver, I'm sure it has to be a very difficult task and very tiresome.
Okay. So let me speak from a personal point of view where my
Okay.
sister-in-law is concerned. Because for us, most of us reside overseas,
Okay.
right? As a matter of fact, that is the only sibling, well, the only brother that we have in Jamaica.
Okay.
And my sister in law is an only child, so she does not have
Oh,
a extended
wow.
family, right? So it has gotten to a point wherein I was more so concerned about her, Bree, than I think she was for herself. Because it was very taxing. It was about getting him ready in the morning, then, you know, all the meals, all the preparation, getting him personally, prepared. Then she has to go to work. Then she comes back, she picks him up, and then the story begins again. And oftentimes I said, when do you take time for yourself? You got to take time for yourself, Bash, or else you're going to be burnt out. So it is important for families to come together and to make the load lighter. What we did as a family, and this can work for anybody, is that we created a WhatsApp group, right? And this we named after him Sam's Welfare Group. And in that group, all discussions were made. His appointments, his doctor's appointment were
Good.
shared. The results of what happened after a doctor's visit was shared in that group. What that does is that it cuts down on the possibility of having to make several calls. It also eliminated false misrepresentation because when you give the information once, everybody's getting the same information. So I'm not going to be calling Bree and say, "Oh, Bree, you know that the doctor said that he should come back tomorrow." Not that the doctor says he might. Not that the doctor says this is a trial made. Not that. So everybody gets the same information at the same time. When it also came down to time that we were looking at getting help for him, all the information was discussed there. All the financial decisions was made there, right? So we knew exactly, everybody was on the same
That's a
page
great
in terms
idea.
of knowing what was happening. Even now that my brother has died, we're using that same group. We have not yet started formal, you know, evaluation and preparation, because there are some things that will also have to fall into place before we can make decisions. But we're going to be going back to that same group to make decisions. We don't do a call and a one to one. So I don't just call and speak to Bree. If I'm talking to Bree, there should be somebody else in the
I
conversation.
agree.
Where my family is concerned, his wife looks a lot to me and my oldest brother. That is how my family has always been. Everybody looks to my oldest brother and myself. But guess what? Not because people look to us to make the decisions. We don't just make decisions on our own.
There has to be
We
some
make
transparency. So
decisions
yeah, that's really
based
that
on
that's
a
a good idea.
family group and a family setting, because we want everybody to be able to make their input. Some might not have it financially, but some may have an input that will make sense. So we want to get everybody involved. So it's very important that families come together, lighten the load of one person. Don't let it just be a one person job.
Yes.
You know, I
Yes.
have a sister
Now,
in
let
Jamaica,
me
my
ask you
sister in law.
this. Let me ask you this. I'd like to welcome Maxine. Thank you so much for tuning in. Would you say this is a great opportunity for like the church brethren or friends? You know, like for instance, if your sister-in-law was an only child and his family they're in the States, isn't this a great opportunity for friends, church brethren to step in and say, hey, you know what? Let me come and give you an hour break or whatever. Let me come and sit with him for a little while, sit and talk with him or read to him or whatever it is. I mean, are we missing out on opportunities to help?
Well, Bree, let me firstly say that my brother and sister in law, they don't just have a church. They have a family within the church. A
Wonderful.
family that is there individually, persons individually, a family that is there from the pastor of the church down to the pew member, a family within the church. That is what my brother's church family has been. If I did not have a church home and I was looking for a church home, that church would want me. I would want to become a part of that assembly, just for the way that they rally, and they have rallied around my brother and sister in law. My brother has had times that he has gone missing, he has wandered away. And every occasion, we have had pastors, we have had ministers, we have had regular layperson from the church, always there. When my brother took down on Thursday morning, got ill, and needed to go to the hospital, it was an old entourage that followed that police car to the hospital. They were there from the onset, and they have been there from the beginning. Fellowship Tabernacle in Kingston, pastored by the Reverend Al Miller. I salute you all. Thank you so very much for being that extended family to my brother Sam and my sister in law Vashti. What you have done, words are not enough for me and the rest of my family to say thank you.
That is amazing, and that is, I think, a beautiful example for other churches to follow. Because I do think, you know, I'd like you to address caregiver burnout. You know, because if a person is in a situation where there is no family, you know, to come and help for this person to take a break. You know, how
Mm-hmm.
wonderful that, you know, your brother and sister-in-law had church family to be there and be of assistance. So I'd like you to address caregiver burnout, because I don't care how nice you are, you will go through burnout, you will get tired. So I'd like you to address caregiver burnout.
Okay. So in chapter 6 of my book, it says the physical and mental exhaustion of caregiving. Caregiving can slowly transform living into survival instead of a lifestyle. There's a level of exhaustion that sleep alone can never mend. It is caused by the constant burden of worry, continual vigilance, and unrelenting fear. You find yourself, that's the caregiver, find themselves forever looking ahead, anticipating the next crisis, and mentally preparing solutions before the need even arise. I'll skip a little bit and I'll go down, and it says dementia caregiving is not only emotionally draining, it is also physically and mentally exhausting. Many caregivers begin each morning already tired, not because they're lazy, not because they are weak, but rather because their minds rarely get the opportunity to rest. So, for the person, I can't speak from that person who has no break, but I can only imagine the burnout, the exhaustion, the feeling of trapped, because a lot of caregivers feel trapped. It says, sadly, a large number of caregivers often carry silent anger towards family members who rarely visit, avoid responsibility, minimize the situation, and only appear during emergencies, if at all. There are family members who become judgmental of caregiving decisions without their own investment of help or suggestion. The emotional loneliness can feel devastating, especially when one person becomes the primary caregiver and the one carrying most of the burden. So, as I said, we can't speak to any one person because my sister in law has had persons that will volunteer,
That's
persons that she
beautiful.
can call upon, right? But what about the person who does not have that?
And that's the
Unfortunately,
point I want to get across, because for that person who they may not want to ask for help, but I'm sure that if you're on the outside looking in, you have to see that this person is crying out for help. And like your brother's church did, I'm hoping that more churches, more friends, more people will step in and say, you know what, let me come and sit standing for you for an hour. What can I do for you? Because that
right.
caregiver burnout has to be overwhelming. And you know, for your sister-in-law, I'm pretty sure that even though she may have had to work really hard and she went through a lot, there is nothing that will replace the loss of her husband. I'm sure she would have done it for the rest of her life if she had to. Because, and I'm glad
Yes.
you mentioned like the love, because I think if when we're caregiving and we remember the love for the patient, but also love for ourselves, right? Then I think then it will help us to say, you know what, I'm struggling. I need some help and reaching out. And I want the caregivers out there to know there's no shame in needing assistance, because it's definitely not an easy task, which is leading to my next question, Marcia. Are there any
But
available?
before you go to your next question, can I just interject here? Because
Sure.
that chapter 7, it says when burnout becomes dangerous.
Okay.
Caregiver caregiver burnout is real.
Yes.
Left unrecognized and untreated, it has the potential to become physically, emotionally, and mentally dangerous. Some warning signs to be on the lookout for with caregivers include irritability, emotional numbness, frequent crying, feeling of hopelessness, extreme fatigue, resentment, panic attacks, withdrawals from others, and loss of motivation, feeling of being trapped. Because a lot of people see caregiving as, why am I the one who is trapped here? And, in this also, I just want to share a personal story because I think I mentioned to you that I have a sister in England and she's
Okay.
also going through some emotional um, memory loss. She's not having dementia. No signs of any test or anything shows that she's having dementia.
Okay.
What they have said is that it's the emotional stress that she's going through. She recently, well, some years ago, lost her husband,
Okay.
and those two have been together for years. So it's like going into the house, the environment, everything. And then she's having some other challenges, right? And I remember when I came back from England, I remember one day I was just in my kitchen and I walked in, Brie. And for a moment, a couple of moments, sometime, I just didn't know why I had gone into the kitchen. I kept asking myself, what did I come for again? Why am I here? What did I come for? I came for something, but I have no idea. And Brie, I remember my mind would just flash into my sister in England, flashing back to Jamaica, my brother there. And I had a pity party that morning. I bawled. I hollered. Took myself, I went into the living room and I just broke down. And I remember after I had broken down, I found myself talking to myself aloud, just like I'm talking to you now. And I said, Marcia, what more can you really do? You're one person. What more can you really do? You're limited by distance. You're limited by whatever abilities you're able to do financially. And I found myself starting to encourage myself. You are doing the best that you can.
Yes.
And after I had done that, there's a little part in my book that says, yes, there are times when we must speak to ourselves. We should encourage ourselves. The Bible states in Proverbs 18 and verse 21 of the King James Version, death and life are in the power of the tongue. And so, coming back to where you spoke about how can caregivers get help? You got to create a care team if possible. And I know not everybody has the ability to do that because you may be limited in who you have around you. But if you don't have the help, then you got to, as best as possible,
Well, Mayor,
secure that person you're taking.
I just want to, because my next question was going to be about available resources.
Mm-hmm.
Are there available resources out there, whether it's through the government or, whatever it is that can help families, whether it's with financial needs or caregiving? I'm not sure Jamaica would have a lot of that. I would like to believe there's something like that available in this country, but do you know of any resources that anyone could turn to during their time of need with, who's suffering with dementia?
You mean like in the US of A or Jamaica?
Jamaica or the USA? Is there any government assistance? I mean, was there anything that your brother was able to utilize in Jamaica? Do you know of anything here in this country?
Unfortunately, I think my sister in law had checked and there was not much that was available because he had not yet gotten to pensionable age.
Okay.
And so I don't think she was not able to get any benefits from there. We have, I think, what is called the National Health Fund or something like that. That you get a small stipend towards like medication, doctor's visit. I think she was
Okay.
able to get that, but also because she had a health insurance from her job, she was able to utilize that which grossly, affected, significantly assisted in terms of like covering his like doctor's visit, purchasing medications and stuff like that. For here in the United States, I have not really checked much on it, but we
Okay.
have SSI, we have stuff that I am sure that if persons should go into the social security offices, make checks online, there may be things, there may be local community groups and welfare offers that may be available. So persons would actually need to check in based on your location. I know in England also that they do have facilities that you can tap into.
Okay. Okay. That's definitely good to know. Now, I'd like to talk about communication. Communicating with the patient, choosing not to be condescending, being patient, keeping the patient engaged mentally. How important is that? Because I know that just because a person may have memory loss or whatever it is, I still believe that, we should, try our best to continue to communicate with them, but not be condescending. How important is that, Marcia?
It is very important that we help them to maintain their dignity because that's what it boils down to. Treat others the way we want to be treated. And not because they may not be able to communicate, they may not be able to say to you that I want to wear this outfit, still have a conversation with them. Oh,
Yes.
Bree, it's Tuesday and we're going to dress up today, girl. And, here is two outfits. They may not be able to identify and say blue, green, yellow, but still hold them up, and say, you know what? I think
Yes.
I'm going to give you the yellow one today. I think I'm going to give you some oatmeal today. What do you think? And, just make fun. Um, Not because they're not able to relate to you after a while. I think it is still very, very important that we continue to communicate with them because we never know that moment that the mind might just do a little click and something will come to them because from time to time they do have that. I'll have
Yes.
moments that I call my brother and I could talk from here to eternity and he doesn't answer. And I may have days that I'll call and my sister in law will say to him, Samo, your sister's on the line. And he hears my voice. Oh, Sharon, you know, or something like that. I have not heard that in quite a while, to be quite honest. But then the times that I would hear those gave me the assurance that you still want to continue to communicate because you never know when that very rare occasion will come in that you'll get a response out of them.
How important is it to make an effort to include the patient in family activities, whether it's going to the store, going to church, going out to a restaurant? Should that be a priority?
It should always be. And you spoke earlier on about not having them locked away at all times. Locked up in a room, being non-communicative. It's very important that we have them as a part of who we are. I remember years ago when I was a child, Bree. I was just a mere child. I might have been about. I was thinking about it recently, maybe between 6 and 7. But my grandmother was a community person, right? And so everything that happens and persons need assistance, they would call my grandmother for help. And I remember vividly one night she was called by a gentleman. He had rented a room to someone, and the person had moved out in the middle of the night. But he said during the day, and especially as the evening came on, he was hear some banging, banging, banging going on in the room. So he decided to open the door and to go inside. And when he went inside, to his dismay, there was a disabled young man that the mom had moved out and left in the room. He was handicapped, he was disabled, he was Almost 60 years later, Bree, and now that I'm thinking about it, I want to cry.
That is so sad.
And the state he was left in, all the human things that you can think of was in that room. You could smell it from before the door was opened. So when we talk, and that woman lived in that house with that child, gagged the child for the most of the part, tied up the child,
That's so
so
inhumane. I mean, because at the end of the day, I understand it has to be overwhelming, but we're talking about a human being. And I think, I
her
mean,
own
where is
child,
the empathy? Where is the compassion? Because at the
her
end
own
of the
child.
day, I mean, would she want to be treated that way?
Yeah. So there are so many persons who have not just a dementia person, but persons who are living with disabilities, and they are so ashamed of them. They will never take them out. They will never have them in public. They will never do anything with them. So it comes back to us just saying, you have your loved one. You're going down the road for a treat, for an ice cream, for something. Take them with you. Brie, can I
Yes.
tell you that over the years that my brother has been here, every Father's Day, every birthday, I send money to my sister in law. He loves KFC. I'll be like, take him to KFC. Take him out to Devon House ice cream. Buy him ice cream. Treat him. So, another part here, I have to say, hats off to my sister in law. She's not locking up Sam in the house and leaving. Going to church, he's going to go to church. It's just recently that she would leave him. And the only reason why she leaves him is because her neighbor is right there giving an eye,
Right, right, right.
right? And so she would go to church in the morning, she would do praise and worship, and by the time midday service is about to begin, she's home back to her husband. So, Bree, I really have to say hats off to this young lady. She has gone above and beyond to prove to be a wife extraordinary.
That is, I'm so glad for what you shared. I think that at the end of the day, we have to have compassion and empathy and remember the love. And I have to ask you this. Did you find yourself grieving the loss of who your brother was before he was struck by dementia?
Most definitely. My brother was one of the most amazing human beings. We shared so much together, Bree. I remember at 24 years old, we lived home with our dad, and I was pregnant. And from I can remember well, I've always said I would not stay in my parents' house and have a child. So when I was 4 months pregnant, I went back home to Jamaica, and I decided then I was looking for, you know, we don't say apartment then. We say we're looking for a little room back home in Jamaica,
Yes,
right?
yes,
We're looking
yes.
for a little room. And so when I told my brother that I was looking for somewhere to live, he's like, you can't go out on your own, sissy. He used to call me. Say, you can't go out on your own and you're pregnant. What if something happens to you in the night? And so Bree, he took it upon himself and he found us a 2 bedroom and we moved together. My brother was there when my daughter was born. My brother was the morning sitter before my nanny came in. He was the day sitter if my nanny was not coming in. He was the evening sitter if she had to leave before I come. He was her pride and joy. And I tell you, even just before my brother got sick, if he's standing and he sees my niece coming down the road, he better start gearing up. Why? Because he knows she's going to run to him and she's just going to jump in his arms. Right? That's the bond they share. To tell you, my brother was never a controversial person. My brother would be coming home. People would think that my daughter was his. Because he's coming home, he's coming with one of those little Gerber bottle foods. He's coming with a little something for her to eat. You know, Jamaica, we have our little
Mm.
cheese tricks. We have, right?
Yes.
Come, he's not coming in that house free without something for Terry. And whatever Terry wanted, Terry got. So he was just an amazing human being. As a father, he was exceptional. As a son, he was amazing. As a human being, there's hardly a second name. And so I am saddened with his passing, but at the same time, he's no longer suffering. My sister in law related to me that I think over the weekend he was having some pain, but he couldn't express, he couldn't say where was hurting him. But she knew he was having pain because, you know, like when he stand, you could see the emotion going through and he's not able to stand or do what he's doing. And she said, Merce, when I saw my husband, when I saw the tears coming down, and I saw it, because she said she kept saying to him, where is hurting, Sam? She said, not even for him to nod his head or to point or to touch, he could not do it. But the tears were just silently coming down. And when she told me that, it broke me. And I'm like, why is it that good people suffer?
That is so sad.
You know? But, you know, miracles on top of miracles, Brie, and I don't think I shared this with you because we have not spoken. But on Thursday morning at about 2 a.m., I had already uploaded the book and I was hesitating because I have a book signing coming up next week, Sunday afternoon. And I was like, should I press? You know, you go on Amazon, it says you got to approve and you got to launch. And at 2 a.m., I heard a voice says, go ahead and put the book into print.
Yes.
And I'm like, but Lord, I don't know if I want it out there before I have and the voice said, put the book into print. And it's about maybe 2:20 thereabout, I press launch for the book to go into print. That was Thursday morning, the 13th at about 2 a.m. My brother died Thursday morning,
Wow.
9:30 a.m. So the date of the book release is the date he died.
Wow.
And I think that there is something amazing to
You
be
know
said
what?
about
That's your book is honoring your brother's memory and honoring his life. I think your book will be a great resource for those who are going through this sad situation. Dementia is it's such a brutal disease and it's cruel. That's the best word
it.
I can find it. It's cruel,
Yes.
in what it does. But you know, I am glad for the things that we touched on. And you brought up the word dignity earlier. And I'm thinking of the woman you mentioned that left her handicapped child. You know, when you think of a person who is unable to help themselves, I remember years ago a gentleman that was friends with the comedian Richard Pryor. He talked
Mm-hmm.
about visiting him one afternoon, and he said that he had a bowel movement on himself and he said he had to clean him up and help him. And he said that Richard Pryor was very embarrassed about that. But he said that was my friend, and I didn't have a problem with helping him clean himself up. It's like things like that, you know, thinking of a person's dignity, thinking of a person, how they want to be treated. Just because a person is disabled or sick in some way, they're still human beings. I can tell that you had a lot of love for your brother, and I'm so glad you wrote this book. You shared that you write children's books. That's what you usually write. But I believe the
Right.
Lord put this on your heart for a reason, because this book is going to help so many people. And I feel honored that you came tonight, that you came and, you just had a loss, but you still came to share your story. I'm so thankful.
Thank you, Bree, and thank you so much for the opportunity. Um, my prayer is that if this book can help one person, one family faced with dementia, then my brother's life would not have been in vain. Because, Bree, I had no idea of writing this book. And when I started, I probably thought maybe I would be probably maybe 90 pages, 80 pages. I've gone over 260 pages in this book. And don't ask me how I got there, because I would write and another thought would come to me and I would write. I tell you, even the name of the book, Bree, I got that name of you, your loved one, and dementia while lying in my bed.
That's from God. That's God. That's nothing. That's God. That's God.
You, your loved one, and dementia. Where did that come from? I don't know. And I just got up and I wrote. I always try to keep a notepad and a pen beside me. And I wrote and I just started writing. It took me maybe about 3 months, 4 months. It also took a lot from me because I had to realize at one point that I need to rewrite, I need to rearrange. I had the message, but they were not in the right context. I had to rewrite. When my editor started asking me some questions, I'm like, if he's asking me these questions, then this book is not ready. I have a best friend, and she became my initial editor. We would write, and she would say, "Oh, Marcia, this part doesn't sound so right. What are you trying to say? You know?" And at one point, I think I recall saying to her, I said, "Laura, I didn't know that this was going to take so much out of me. Me can't bother you here, man. You know, Jamaican, me can't bother. I mean, I can't be bothered for those who don't understand the language." And she said, "You're not a quitter. If you're a quitter, you're not my friend." She said, "You can't come this far." She says, "The book makes sense. Now, what you need to do is make sense." you know, and that kind of said to me that it tells me that what was needed was in the book.
Yes.
I just needed to take the time to rearrange, to rewrite, to write everything down on paper, to see where I need to rearrange and put what. And that is what I did. So I have persons who are mad with me because I have not returned call. I have not answered the phone. I've not been on social media other than to try to promote the book. But in all that we do, there's a sacrifice. Now, the
Yes.
sacrifice for me was I going to be doing social media? Was I going to be chatting? Was I going to be texting? Or was I going to be writing something that can make a change in a family's life? And I chose to do the latter. And I'm happy that I did.
I'm so glad you did. I am so glad that you did. And like I said, I am just so thankful that you decided to write that book. I'm glad you listened to the voice of God, and I really believe your book will make a great impact on others, because this is something that's affecting so many families.
Thank you so much, Brie. I really appreciate it. And as I said, at one point I'm like, Are you emotionally stable to do this interview? And I do have my weak moments. I feel like I want to break down at times, but I'm here. This is
You did a beautiful job tonight. You really shared a lot of great information. I am looking forward to reading your book. I will definitely make sure I get a copy this
Oh,
week.
please don't. I'm going to mail you a copy. I have your copy here, which I'm going
Okay, well, I
to.
appreciate that. I am
So,
really looking forward to reading it, and I hope that we can do a part two of this conversation because
I
I
would be
am
more than happy because there's so much that we have not yet even looked
right.
at.
There's so much to tap into.
Once you have gotten the book and you are able to go through it, then I
Yes, then
know that
we'll
definitely we're
definitely
going to
do a
need to have
part
to
two to this.
revisit. Yes, definitely.
Definitely. And
Mhm.
once again, I'd like to give you my condolences on the loss of your brother. And I'm just so thankful that you are making a difference. Like, someone said to me a long time ago, your test will become your testimony, and I think that's exactly what you're doing. Do you have any closing thoughts that you would like to share with the viewers before we
Most
close?
definitely. To you, if you're out there and you're a caregiver in any form, any capacity, let me say thank you first and foremost. Let me also encourage you because I know it can be a daunting job. But let me encourage you do not become discouraged. You are making a difference. And remember, memory may fade, but love never evades. Keep
Amen.
on going on. Keep on caring. Because as I said earlier on, you never know that fleeting moment, that memory will flash back. And that kind word, that kind deed, that little singing, that little dancing that you're doing will just click in the memory. So just keep on doing what you're doing. You are important and you make a difference. Thank you for being that caring caregiver that you are. God bless you all. And Bree,
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for the opportunity for
You're
having me join
welcome.
you. And I just pray God's abundance of blessings upon you continually.
Thank you.
Continue to do what you're doing
Thank you.
in
Thank you
keeping
so much.
listeners, viewers informed and inspired. Thank you,
Thank you. And I
Bree.
have to share this with the viewers. When I spoke to Marcia for the first time and I shared with her, unfortunately, this is something that has happened in my family. And she said a prayer right then and there for me. She said a prayer right then and there for me that this will not touch you. And I was so moved by that because then that told me about who you were as an individual, and that meant a great deal to me. I had to share that with the viewers. And I would also like to mention, and I sent it to you, I don't know if you've had a chance to watch it, that documentary called
No,
Alive Inside.
I am definitely going to watch it when I'm done here.
It's a beautiful documentary, and I'd like to let the viewers know you can find it on YouTube. It's free. It's called Alive Inside, and it talks about how music can be used to help those who are suffering with dementia. It's a very beautiful documentary. Yeah. So once again, thank you so much, Marcia, and I'm looking forward to us having part two of this conversation.
Definitely, Bree. And as I said again, thank you so much. And keep on inspiring, keep on informing, and keep on being a blessing to others.
Thank you so much for your kind words. God bless everyone, and I'm wishing everyone a blessed week. Take care.
Take care. You be